What was it you found out about this?
Well, Michael, for several months now, I've been working on a story that talks about the construction quality of the Plaza Towers and Briarwood Elementary Schools in Moore. And what we discovered through just not only open records requests, but interviews with several structural engineers, is it doesn't look like either building was built to code, to construction code, and they weren't built with reinforced masonry walls. And in some places, there were beams and parts of the buildings that weren't even properly attached.
How did that happen?
You have to understand that the original Plaza Towers building was built back in the 60s, in I believe 1965. And then there were other buildings. Those schools are both complexes. There are several buildings at each school. And the building where the children were killed by the storm at Plaza Towers was actually the third grade center that sat next to the school. That was built about 13 years ago. At Briarwood, no child was killed, but there were injuries. The original building was built in 1984. There was a fire there later in 1998. It was reconstructed or reconfigured, and then there were several buildings built around it. So construction at both schools had happened on and off for the past decade.
And did we know about the problems with these people who built these buildings?
Well, what happened after the storm hit, a team of investigators, civil engineers, architects, and graduate students from the American Society of Civil Engineers and the Structural Engineering Institute went to Moore, and with the assistance of FEMA, they were allowed to examine the rubble at the Briarwood School to look at what the storm did to the school so they could compile that data, go back, write a report, and come up with ways to address those issues in future building codes. Not only did they discover what the storm did and how it affected the schools and the structures, but they also discovered numerous flaws in the school's construction.
Like what?
Well, for example, at Briarwood, they found there was a huge I-beam that tied parts of the walls to the roof of the school. Now, this I-beam, this is a heavy metal beam. It was placed on top of the walls, and those are supposed to be anchored with large bolts into concrete and embedded and tied together so it gives integrity to the walls and then ties the walls to the steel of the roof. This I-beam had no bolt holes for even bolts. It was literally just placed there. And as the civil engineer told me, he said the only thing holding it up there was gravity.
And so just a little push knocked it right over.
Exactly. Now, they got to see all the rubble of Briarwood, but they did not get to see the rubble of Plaza Towers because it had already been cleaned up. Remember, the officials were cleaning up debris very quickly after the storm hit.
But the people who constructed these have been in trouble before, is what you find out.
Well, we discovered with Briarwood that the original Briarwood School was designed and built by a company named RGDC. And that was a very prominent A&E firm in Oklahoma County in the metro area from the late 70s up until 1996. They designed the Oklahoma County Jail, some buildings for the FAA. They designed Westmore High School, Briarwood. And in 1996, all three founders of the firm were called before State Licensing Board and ordered to surrender their license for practicing outside of the scope of their means. The man who signed the plans for the Briarwood schools, a guy named F. Robert Cornell, he was ordered by the Civil Engineering Board to stop practicing civil engineering without a license.
Are there other schools that might be built this badly?
RGDC did a lot of work, and at least we know they did Westmore. I don't know what other schools. I'm sure there are other buildings in this area that potentially could have flaws. That would not surprise me a bit, depending on how prominent and how much work this company did. But it wouldn't surprise me. I think they did some stuff for Redlands Community College, too.
So if I've got my kid going to one of these schools, do I have to wait until a tornado comes to find out if it is up to code?
No, I think what should happen on something like that is if it's determined, you go in and ask who originally designed this school, who built it. And if it was somebody like RGDC, I think I would ask that they have a structural engineer come out and examine it and see how well the school is actually constructed. I mean, there's this big discussion going on in the state right now about safe rooms and how schools need them, and they do. But it doesn't do any good to put a safe room in a school if the school's not built properly.
Did you talk to family members about this?
Yeah, that was one of the most painful interviews I did, was with the a family of one of the students who died at Plaza Towers. And it was a really, really heartbreaking interview because I had photographs, and I had discovered also that she had photographs of the Plaza Tower school. And the photos show. I mean, you can, if you lay that photo down in front of a civil engineer who knows what to look for, they'll point right at it and say this school wasn't built properly.
So with the people you talk to, do they believe that these children could have survived if Plaza Towers had been built to code?
The engineer told me if the buildings had been built to code, and we're talking about both schools, not just Plaza, but Plaza and Brown, if the building had been built to code, the walls probably wouldn't have fallen.
And those children could have still been alive.
That's correct.